In the crossfire tonight, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California and Republican Congressman Tim Huelskamp of Kansas. Congressman Schiff, let me start with you. Is this a good deal? Are you happy with what Paul Ryan and his counterpart announced today?
Well, I'm pleased that we're back to negotiating again, and we may avoid another fiscal cliff or shock to the economy. But I'm skeptical about what I've heard so far. I don't want to see an agreement that's balanced on the backs of federal employees who've already given up over $100 billion in terms of sacrifices over the last few years and lost wages and a freeze in terms of their income. So is it balanced is going to be one of the questions I have. I don't like the fact there's no extension of unemployment compensation in this. I also think that where it looks like we're going for revenues doesn't make a lot of sense. Tacking on fees to airline tickets is a strange way to finance the government. I'd much rather see us do away with some of the farm subsidies to the major agri-businesses that don't need them, as well as closing other special interest tax loopholes. So I have to say, I don't like a lot of what I've heard about it, but the only thing I do like is it may avoid another shock to the economy.
So it's good that we're moving forward. But I turn to you, Congressman. Now, a lot of conservative groups have already come out saying they hate this thing. Americans for Prosperity hates it. Heritage hates it. Freedom Work hates it. Are you willing to, in the name of moving forward and getting some deal, avoiding another shutdown, are you willing to buck those big conservative voices and stick with Paul Ryan?
Well, I think far too often the question in Washington seems to be, can we make a deal? I'd rather say, can we find a solution? This deal raises spending. There's no way around it. It's more spending for both sides. And far too long, most conservatives would agree that's the problem in Washington. I don't know how a deal is good for conservatives for America if the spending is going to go up.
Well, but given what you know and given the fact that the alternative to this might be a shutdown, would you be willing to support it for now? Maybe you can do more later on, but are you willing to support Paul Ryan now? Knowing what you know now, would you vote for it?
I would not, and it's usually not a binary choice. There are other options, other proposals, but at the end of the day, in August of 2011, we said we're going to have some hard caps on spending, and what they're trying to do is blow through these caps. At our Republican conference, we've discussed this for the last couple of years, and our leadership has said again and again, this is the one thing we've achieved for $3 trillion of increases in the debt.
Wait, so Congressman, let me push you on that. So you're suggesting then for Republicans who just weathered some not fun weather during the first shutdown, you're suggesting for Republicans that it's better that they reject a bad medium-term deal or you're saying it's better to go through another shutdown than to accept a bad medium-term deal?
Well, in a way, I'm surprised leadership would even be offering this, because we've talked about this again and again about long-term solutions. I mean, Paul Ryan's been very clear about that. We need not just short-term ideas, we need long-term solutions. There is no changes to the entitlements here.
Do you feel that Paul Ryan has sold you out? You saw him at this press conference. He was not saying the things that you're saying now. He was saying you got to take what you can get. Do you feel that Paul Ryan has sold you out?
Well, I don't know about selling out. I haven't seen the details on that, and I will not say that. But at the end of the day, spending is going up. Republicans and conservatives in particular have said for years we've been spending too much money. And the bipartisan agreement, and bipartisan usually scares us, that means more spending at the end of the day.
Well, Congressman Schiff, let me ask you a similar question. Paul Ryan rarely gets credit for working across the aisle, and he does it frequently. Are you going to give him credit for coming up with this bill, working with Patty Murray?
You know, I give him credit, absolutely, for trying to hammer something out. It may or may not fly. I think.
Yeah, but all we hear about is the intransigent Republicans, the obstructionist Republicans.
No,
I'd like to give him a little credit.
No, I think he deserves credit. This is not easy for him to sell to his own conference, as you can tell from our conversation here. So I do give him credit, but I don't know whether we'll get there, because we're going to lose a substantial number of Republicans. We're going to lose a substantial number of Democrats if what we hear about the deal is it too disproportionately impacts federal employees, if it doesn't go after any of the special interest tax breaks like that Democrats would like to see help finance an end to the sequester. Democrats don't like the sequester level. We feel this is an austerity budget that's really doing damage to the economy. I think if, frankly, we had a budget that was making an investment in infrastructure and jobs, and we were able to pass the president's jobs bill, our economy would have fully recovered from the recession by now. So I don't think any of this is good economics. The only question is this less worse economics than going through with a sequester?
But let me be a little sort of counterintuitive. Wasn't the sequester good for you guys? wasn't the sequester good for Democrats in that you got those defense cuts you wanted and you got to paint Republicans as being cold-hearted, slashing those social programs? What are you going to lean on now?
No, I don't think it was good for Democrats at all, and Democrats don't think it was good for the country. And we're not willing to trade even a short-term political advantage for something that's damaging the economy. A lot of Democrats, myself included, think the defense cuts are too steep, too fast. They don't let the Defense Department go through a reduction in a more methodical way. So there's not a lot Democrats like about this sequester at all. But the most significant thing is there are millions of people who are still struggling to get by, still struggling to find work, still struggling to stay in their homes. And all of this seems very unnecessary and a result of this austerity budget.
Well, you know, one of the things that I am interested in, we talked about giving some credit to Paul Ryan. I'd like to give some credit to President Obama, and I wonder if you would agree. President Obama, in some ways, has defanged the Tea Party. You are a very strong to the Tea Party movement. You guys had one weapon, a super weapon, that was the shutdown. And President Obama stood his ground, let you guys overshoot on the last shutdown. You can never fire that weapon again, and now you're going to have to kind of take what you can get. Don't you have to give President Obama a little bit of credit for having played this chess game pretty well?
Harry Reid credit for a shutdown. It was Harry Reid did not let things come to a vote. But one thing we can't forget is it was President Obama and the two folks that announced the deal. And I don't know about Adam, I voted against the Budget Control Act that started the sequester. It's interesting. Washington said it was the worst thing ever, but they all took credit for it on August 2nd of 2011. And so if it was such a bad deal today, why did they agree to it? Why did they move forward on that? At the end of the day, we understand we have a spending problem here, and this increases spending below what was agreed to, a bipartisan agreement just 2 years ago.
You know, I think I support the Budget Control Act, and I think that many of us who did made one fundamental misjudgment, and that is that we thought within the Republican caucus there would be such strong opposition to the defense cuts that they would never go along. Sure. That was the gamble. But in fact, as it turned out, the deficit hawks were more powerful than the defense hawks. Yep. And that was a miscalculation, and we are all paying a serious price for that.
Well, look, now the deck has been reshuffled, so we're going to have to, we'll come back after the break. We'll keep talking. Look, Speaker John Boehner is going to need some Democratic votes to get this deal through the House. Next, I want to ask you, Congressman, what will that spark a Republican revolt that could cost the Speaker his job? Welcome back. In the Crossfire tonight, we have Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff and Republican Congressman Tim Huelskamp. Tonight, we are following breaking news. We've got reaction coming in to the just-announced deal to avoid another government shutdown. We're going to go back to CNN Chief Congressional Correspondent Dana Bash. Dana?
That's right, Vanna. Just to recap, this is a deal that would last for 2 years. It would do away with those forced spending cuts and instead put in some new cuts, but raise the level of spending for the next year at least. And that is something that Paul Ryan, who is the architect on the Republican side of this deal, said that is necessary because there's divided government. But guess what? As you can imagine, not all of his Republican colleagues agree, especially some others who might want to run for president in 2016. Senator Marco Rubio of Florida just released a statement saying that he opposes this because he says this does nothing to deal with the long-term problems in the budget, dealing with the debt and the deficit, and also because he likes those forced spending cuts. And this is something that you've heard from conservative groups all day long, writing letters to conservative members of Congress saying, please oppose this because they don't want to do away with those spending caps because they feel that is really the only way, even in the short term, to force Congress to keep spending in the government down. So you definitely see a 2016 presidential fight already shaping up. People say, oh, maybe it's too early to talk about the presidential race. No way. So much of this calculation going on both sides is all about that.
Never too early for us at Crossfire. We're happy to have that debate. Thanks, Dana.
Absolutely.
All right, while this deal is controversial, it's something we almost never see here in Washington, a bipartisan compromise. Listen to House Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan today.
As a conservative, I think this is a step in the right direction. What am I getting out of this? I'm getting more deficit reduction. So the deficit will go down more by passing this than if we did nothing. That's point number one. Point number two, there are no tax increases here. Point number three, we're finally starting to deal with autopilot spending, that mandatory spending that has not been addressed by Congress for years. Look, this isn't easy.
So, Congressman Huelskamp, the Democrats are giving up some stuff in this. Is Paul Ryan wrong that what you're getting isn't enough to push you over the edge to be in favor of this bill?
Well, we are a little disadvantaged to Paul, given we haven't seen the full details.
That is true.
And that never stops people from commenting. But as I understand it, spending will be up higher. But this is not an unprecedented deal. This happened in December of 2011, and it happened last December as well. Every time there's some bipartisan agreement, there's more spending in Washington. This is the same. It's not unprecedented. They did the same thing each December. And I think at the end of the day, as was indicated by Senator Rubio, this doesn't get to the heart of the problem, which is spending. Too much spending. A $700 billion deficit is not good enough. Moving it a few dollars, but I think spending is going up.
Can we get to a deal that you want? I know the deal you want. I understand. I understand the disappointment in the deals that Boehner has put forward and that he's gotten Republicans to sign. I get it. Could we ever get the kind of deal you want?
I think we've always settled for less than we can get with this leadership. At the end of the day, the American people want better than this. And they're going to say, this is what you did. This is considered a great, grand, bipartisan deal. And at the end of the day, spending is going to go up. The deficit, I believe it's going to be higher. We're still waiting on the final details.
Well, you used a very interesting word there. You said leadership. So that brings the question, Boehner. But Boehner is now in a very tough situation, and he's going to be looking over his shoulder at people like you. Is his speakership now in jeopardy? He is going to have to reach out to Democrats to get this thing passed. He can't get you. When he does that put his speakership in jeopardy? Will you stay with Boehner even if he raises these caps and raises some revenue?
Well, I don't see any speaker losing in midterm. We see it now. But at the end of the day, the old Hastert rule was you got to get a majority of your Republicans, and they haven't Emascus. We've been out of town for the weekend, and all of a sudden they have this deal. This has happened 2 Decembers in a row.
Let me just point out a couple of the real problems that we're seeing with the so-called Hastert rule. First of all, there are some major issues that we've been fighting to try to make progress on for a decade. Comprehensive immigration reform, for example, that could go to the president tomorrow if we would simply take it up for a vote in the House. And by sticking to this artificial rule, you're prohibiting a bipartisan agreement. It would be a strong bipartisan vote that would send that package to the president. And there are a lot of other very important national priorities that similarly could go to the president, but for that rule.
Okay.
Now, it does require the speaker to show leadership,
Sure.
and it does require him to stare down some of the Tea Party caucus. But at the end of the day,
it's fair enough.
What was the Pelosi rule that prevented immigration to come to the floor when she was speaker? Why didn't she pass an immigration bill? To blame it on the Republicans when you had control of the House and Senate, the presidency, there was some rule. They didn't want to do it.
Let me bring it back to this.
What changed that equation, frankly, was the elections. And a Republican recognition.
Two straight years to do whatever you wanted to do. And
if the GOP ever wanted a shot at the White House again, they needed to show some flexibility in immigration. And that's a positive change. But we are so close. And to come this close after 10 years and see it held up by this, not even statute or regulation, simply a policy called the Hastert rule, is just a terrible disservice to the country.
Let me bring it back to the current debate and the budget news out today. I want to ask you, Congressman Schiff, about the potential and the news that we're getting that the unemployment benefits extension is not included in this. Is that a deal breaker for you? And hey, if Nancy Pelosi gets the votes, will she have caved on a really crucial issue for Democrats?
Well, what I'm hoping will happen is that unemployment's not part of this deal. We can put together a side deal that does pass unemployment compensation.
But let me ask you about this deal. Is it a deal breaker for this deal?
I don't know if it's a deal breaker for this deal. It depends on what else is in it.
But for Democrats, shouldn't it be?
Oh, I can hear this in 2014 being a big deal.
This is
just to be clear now, and you know as much about this as anybody, and you care as much about it as anybody, but you're talking about 1.3 million active job seekers. You're talking about 20,000 veterans being thrown under the bus right before Christmas, and Democrats signing off on that? Can you sign off on that?
You're exactly right. And it means,
a side deal? We're supposed to wait for a side deal?
It's going to have to mean that the rest of this agreement has a lot to offer, and this is why I started at the beginning of our conversation tonight saying I'm very skeptical. Because if unemployment is not included, if it is unfairly balanced on the backs of federal workers, it's not going to have my support, and I think it's not going to have a lot of Democrat support.
Certainly not. I mean, you've got this progressive wing leading the party leftward. I don't think that's going to stand.
What I hope will happen is that there can be an additional agreement on unemployment that will sweeten the deal.
That's a big risk that you'd have to take, though, voting for this in hopes that something else will come down the line.
We only have a few days to do it, so we'll know about the one when we know about the other.
Well, listen, we're going to get a little bit more information. We want to go to the White House to get some reaction from our senior White House correspondent, Brianna Keeler. What are we learning out there at the White House?
Hi there, Van. Well, early reaction, and this is just what we're getting on background from officials as we await an official statement from the White House, is that they're looking on this very favorably. One White House official telling me they see this to be a very positive development, and I just got this, pardon me, so I'm reading it off my iPhone. They say it's great to move beyond governing by crisis after the chaos of October. They said the sequester is doing real harm. This is a balanced package that helps deal with that, and also adding that they don't love everything in there, but that's what compromise is about. So I think this is certainly what President Obama will be saying that he supports. He is currently on his way back from Africa, and we are awaiting official reaction, Van and S.E.
Brianna, just one question, though. The president spent an awful lot of political capital last week. His entire speech to the country, his weekly address was about unemployment insurance. He was talking about active job seekers. Now, you've got this deal on the table. It has nothing in there about that, and the White House is saying that's a good thing?
I think they're not saying that's a good thing, and let me explain what we've heard from Jay Carney. And certainly you could argue that the preference would have been for unemployment insurance to be in this package. Jay Carney was asked last week, will the president sign a bill that doesn't include unemployment insurance? He sidestepped that, making it certainly making you wonder if the president may do that, and it sounds like he's going to do that. We've heard from Jay Carney. He said that it's important that unemployment insurance is passed. The vehicle for it doesn't matter so much. So I think you heard President Obama pressing for it last week. He did dedicate his weekly address to it. I think he's going to continue to push for it when you're talking about 1.3 million Americans who are losing their unemployment benefits. But when it comes to this bill, it sounds like he will sign it.
Okay, thanks, Bree. Stay here for our continuing breaking news coverage of the budget deal, and we'll be back after this. We're back with Adam Schiff and Tim Huelskamp. We're following breaking news of a budget deal reached on Capitol Hill. Let me ask you, Congressman, we just heard from White House correspondent Brianna Keeler that the White House pretty much likes this bill. But don't you think it's really just a short-term fix that kicks the can down the road on so many other long-term problems?
Absolutely. But it's probably, from the White House point of view, better than going through another budget fight and another blow to the economy that would produce. Nobody was expecting a big deal here. Yeah. I think expectations were set very low, and they have met those expectations, at least in the White House's
Sorry,
view.
Paul Ryan. Patty Murray.
Very good. And a final question for you, Congressperson. Now, from my point of view, this is a small breakthrough, but it's a historic breakthrough. I think we now see the end of shutdowns, the end of these spending caps. There is a grand bargain out there for you. I think this president actually wants to bring the deficits down. He's going to need some tax increases, though, to sell to his base. Will you help the president now that we're in a new era looking for the next grand bargain?
No more tax increases. It's my understanding this has tax increases in it.
Well, they call them fees. Your friend Paul Ryan calls them fees.
Well, people in Kansas are going to pay more money to Washington. They know how that works. So.
Right.
And they had a big tax increase in last January, and we still have a $700 billion deficit. The problem is spending, and this deal raises spending at the end of the day.
Well, listen, we're very low. We did bust these caps, apparently. We came up a little bit, not a whole lot. But now, listen, we're in a new era. There could be another bipartisan deal that could be more to your liking for deficit reduction. But you and I both know you're going to have to accept some tax increases. Are you willing to do that to get the deficit reduction, to get the debt off the backs of your kids? Are you willing to compromise or find some common ground, whatever the word is, with this president?
Well, with this president, raising taxes is just like anywhere else. It's not going to help the economy. And this deal does not help the economy. We need a growing economy. We need less regulations. And we haven't even talked about the president's health care plan. If you want to get the economy growing, you got to roll back on something on that.
I would just say that continuing with this sequester, with this austerity budget, which it is by any other, is the worst for the economy. It kills job growth. It kills investment in our future. And ultimately, it's just the poorest of economics. And that's why we're not fully recovered yet. If Congress would at least get out of the way, I think the economy would have fully recovered by now.
Well, listen, I want to thank both of you for being here, Representative Adam Schiff and Representative Tim Huelskamp. The rest of you, I want you to stay engaged with us here. You can go to Facebook or Twitter to weigh in on our fired back question. Are you happy with the budget deal and this breakthrough? Right now, 40% of you say yes, 60% of you say no. The debate will continue online at CNN.com/crossfire, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. From the left, I'm Van Jones, and I'm happy.
From the right, I'm S.E. Cupp, and I'll wait to see. Join us tomorrow for another edition of Crossfire. Erin Burnett out front starts right now.